Look, it's been a really difficult couple of weeks, months even, as far as Mercedes and the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth. I've been starting fights off everybody, going on social media, killing Colt LH at each and every single juncture. So genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to take this time out right now to say genuinely, as far as Mercedes are concerned and the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, I want to take this time to apologise. To absolutely no one. What do you mean? Mercedes are nowhere yet again. And look, over the past couple of races before the summer break, they've been going gangbusters. Great guns, hadn't they? They'd won 3 of 4. George and Lewis were back. Mercedes were back. And they had themselves the thing that they haven't had over the past 24 months, which was a car commensurate to the not insubstantial skills of King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, and Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Thou shalt put with some respect on both of their names. What are you talking about? But again, at the Dutch Grand Prix, if we are still post-morteming on the week before the Italian Grand Prix, all of a sudden that performance went all by the wayside. Where has it gone? Well, James Allison's given an interview today in the Mercedes post-race debrief, assessing exactly what happened with Mercedes. And to summarise, they don't know what's happened, do they? This is the same thing that we've been seeing across the board as far as ground effect era cars. Lest we forget that Christian Horner, team principal of Red Bull, said something similar. Not that they know or understand what they need to do with the car, and that the question is just a lead time as far as bringing the upgrades. But Christian Horner, after the Dutch Grand Prix, said, we need to take some time to understand. And James Allison cuts a similar figure on this Mercedes post-race debrief, because when asked where the pace has gone before the summer break, the form was fantastic, and then at the Dutch Grand Prix, Sir Lewis Hamilton struggles in qualifying. What are we doing? James Allison to that responded thus: that at the Dutch Grand Prix, the automotive pugilism Rubik's Cube that is that race weekend is techy. It's multifaceted. There are very many things that you need to solve for in real time, being, of course, weather changes, being the wind difference, both in terms of direction and speed. He says that a small change in setup, if you make errors there, then they will feed through to the performance on track. And that, those small errors, as far as setup, car, potentially driver issues, snap oversteer in qualifying as an example, that those very small issues, small setup changes can take you from race lead right the way down to mid-pack. It's very techy, this, says James Allison, as far as ground effect era cars. Now, around the upgrade, lest we forget that they brought upgrades, didn't they? Floor upgrades and adjustments to the aero package. About those upgrades, the question was put forth to James Allison: do we know that those upgrades worked at the Dutch Grand Prix, or were they the root cause of Lewis Hamilton's struggles in qualifying as an example? Here's what James Allison said, and here's where we're going to get techie, Joanna, Christian, because it does get techie. Gian, here's what James Allison had to say. He said of the upgrades, we don't know whether they work. Oh, the humanity. Why do these team principals and head aerodynamicists, technical directors, keep not knowing? Super frustrating is it for Mercedes and Sir Lewis Hamilton fans all around the world? How can they not know? If they're the go-toest minds in F1 aerodynamics, mechanical, technical engineering, all of the aforementioned, how can they not know? Well, James Allison goes on to expound that as far as the upgrade, it's difficult to know definitively whether it worked. Here's what he's got to say. A lot of the pace in that car, particularly this year, will be born of how well those cars handle. He says of the additional downforce that the upgrades, being aero map and the floor that they brought the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth. He says that the additional downforce that he was supposed to deliver, we can take measurements and potentially the downforce, the additional downforce, incremental, potentially it was there, and that we can take comfort from that point of view. However, and here's the clincher, aka deal breaker as far as Mercedes' performance at the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend passed. He says, but a lot of the pace in the car this year, as far as ground effect era cars, is born of how well they handle in real time, drivability as opposed to absolute performance. Oh, their humanity. He says it's not just a question of whether your aero package or your brand new floor upgrade delivers you percentage points in downforce. It's whether the upgrade delivers you ultimately a balanced car in all circumstances, through the corners, combined entry, combined exit, whether it delivers a balanced package from high speed to low. This sounds like Adrian Newey 101. I feel like I'm reading his book again. How to build a car. Remember, this is why people are killing themselves. Both Lance Stroll even, and Zach Brown are desperate to sign themselves Adrian Newey because he knows this. He wrote this handbook. Look, if you read the Adrian Newey book, all he talks about is building a car that can survive and thrive in as many different circumstances as possible. Combined exit, combined entry, or all curbs as an example. That's all that book talks about. And this is now what James Allison is saying, that they need a car that's balanced, that the pace is in its ability to manage for different circumstances in real time. I feel like I'm reading the Adrian Newey book all over again. You remember that Adrian Newey blames himself half for the death of Ayrton Senna, not because of a faulty steering column, but because he failed to adapt the car between 1993 and 1994 to the different circumstances, the different demands. Back in 1993, they had active suspension, didn't they? And he failed to adapt it for the new circumstance. And that's why he thinks Senna passed away. Ultimately, that car wasn't geared nor built to cope for bottoming out. And that's why it bottomed out. And that's what ultimately led to the tragic passing of Senna. And this is what James Allison is talking about now. The adaptability of the car in real time to deal for different circumstances. As far as the automotive pugilism Rubik's Cube that was the Dutch Grand Prix. Ultimately, James Allison concludes thus, we don't know whether the drop-off was due to the floor or the aero package. We need to take that away and deep dive and find out. The Italian Grand Prix, hopefully for Mercedes, the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, will be different. However, if you take this in the context of Lewis Hamilton's underperformance in Q2, this is what we know. This is what James Allison's telling us, that car, the Mercedes, was too knife edgy, that it was snap oversteer, and it wouldn't take much. He says this is it, that Mercedes at the Dutch Grand Prix produced a car that fundamentally was far too ready, and I quote, to snap at the rear when pressed, and not just in the hands of Sir Lewis, because lest we forget, in Q1 George Russell struggled. Again, fine margins, and that's what you don't want in the ground effect era. You want to be able to give Sir Lewis, Carl Davis and Hamilton and King George Russell of King's Lynn Norfolk, first of his name, a car that they can push, that they can have confidence in, where the drivability is unerring, unquestionable. And again, parallels to Adrian Newey's book, he said he would happily lose 10% in terms of absolute pace. This is Adrian Newey I'm talking about now, the goatiest aerodynamic mind to have ever F1'd. He says he'd happily take 10 to 20% off the car in absolute terms pace, and add an equal and opposite 10 to 20% in terms of drivability. Because when you have a driver like a Sir Lewis or a Maximilian Verstappen, that they have confidence in that car is paramount, because then they can overdrive it, outperform it, extract back that additional that you've lost. This is what James Allison's referring to here, but the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth are not there. In conclusion, they say that they don't know. They don't understand. This is uncertainty settings, and they need to go away and deep dive for this post-mortem, technically, diatribe and understand, because they're bringing upgrades and they can't realise what those upgrades were meant to deliver in terms of lap time. Because the car, yet and still, is far too techy, far too oversteery even, far too mercurial and far too temperamental. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.